You're listening to the Artist Athlete Podcast, episode 82. This podcast is dedicated to circus. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey friends, fans, and enemies. I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete Podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. This summer, I got in my pickup truck, I threw a tarp in the back and filled it full of water, so I had a good old-fashioned portable pool, and I drove it over to the website Circus Talk, where I will be hanging out all summer long, margarita in one hand. I'll have my microphone, my podcasting microphone in the other hand, and I'll just be kicking it over at circustalk.com. Circus Talk is a platform. It's international, it's all-inclusive, and it is all about circus. It has news, it has forums, it has job postings. It's a one-stop shop for everything you need to know about the industry. And it has even more on it now because the Artist Athlete Podcast is featured on Circus Talk all through the summer. So grateful to be there. Go check them out. And if you came from Circus Talk, welcome to the podcast. The Artist Athlete Podcast comes through my microphone and into your ears every single week because of people just like you who go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and pledge small amounts of money to help me keep this podcast going. I pay my hosting service fees. I pay my amazing editor, Alisan, and my assistant, Hannah, who helps me book guests. And I get to send out stickers and get cool microphones. And I just moved into a new apartment and I'm going to soundproof it so it sounds even more awesome than before. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that I have planned for the Artist Athlete Podcast. And it is all possible because people like you go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. They pledge some people as little as $1 a month. And every dollar goes into making this podcast what it is and even better. So if you love what you're listening to, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and sign up today. One more bit of housekeeping situation. I swear on this podcast sometimes quite a bit and quite upfront during this particular interview. I took a poll on Instagram. By the way, you can follow me at @the_artist_athlete on Instagram. And according to 98% of the people who voted, you don't care if I swear. And according to the 17 DM follow-ups I got on that story poll, many of you prefer it when I swear. So if you're part of the 2% that's not into it, I don't really know what to tell you except for I swear on this podcast. My guest today is Jesse Dryden. Jesse Dryden is the first and only Canadian graduate of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Clown College. In addition to appearing on stages throughout North America and Europe, he has participated in many festivals, ceremonies, and street events. He is a member of Circus Smirkus of Vermont, where he has served as creative director of the Big Top Tour for 15 years. This bio that I'm reading off of ENC is a little old. He no longer directs at Circus Smirkus. He now directs, nowhere because there's a global pandemic, but he directs other places as well as Circus Smirkus. He has also performed with Cirque du Soleil and as the lead character in Birdhouse Factory by Cirque Mechanic. In Montreal, he teaches clowning arts and acting at the National Circus School. Here's my interview with Jesse Dryden. So, Jesse Dryden, welcome to the Artist Athlete Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Doesn't it sound official? I always start like that, and it makes me laugh.
Yeah, right. Well, and I think it's funny that prior to recording, you told me that, swearing is loud. So I was waiting for you to swear in your intro. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Jesse Dryden, welcome to the fucking Artist Athlete podcast, you asshole.
Wow. And we're off to the start.
Here we go.
We'll fix.
Get a little stir crazy, you know?
Yeah,
Anyway,
tell me about it. Cabin fever.
we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. But first, I always ask people to kind of say in their own words who they are and what they do, because I could introduce you, but you know more about what you do than I do.
All right. So I am Jesse Dryden. I'm a teacher, clown, director, designer. If you want to get into my bio, we can go into my history, and that would just sort of cover that, and then we can go comb through that if you want. But the most interesting, famous thing that I am known for is I'm the first and only Canadian to go to Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Clown College.
Wait, is that true?
It is uncontested. I don't know if it's on the record now, but I've never had anyone.
How the very first fact you stated, I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah, well,
let's fact check this.
You can fact check it all you want. I've never had anyone contest it, and I've never had anyone question it. Yeah, it's sort of one of those non-big deals that is a unique thing.
Yeah.
You know, and being Canadian and being from like the land of Cirque du Soleil, to go off and get this really unique, very, very, I would say prestigious clown education, and then have it not be recognized in my own home country because no one gives a crap what Ringling was in Canada. You know, I feel like I straddle both worlds. I made a lot of my career in the States, namely because that's where there was a lot more money to be made. But I live in Montreal. And the reason for that is that's sort of keeping your finger on the pulse of what is new and what's happening in the circus world. I am currently the clown instructor at the National Circus School here in Montreal. And up until just recently, I was a director at Cirque du Soleil for special projects and other shows. But of course, things have changed in the climate of circus. But we can keep talking about the past. The one thing I was going to say is prior to clown college, I was learning to be a clown. I didn't like just jump in. But the funniest thing about the application, I can tell you that anecdote. It's not a bad one about getting into clown college. At the very top of the application, it says Canadian, even before it says name or date of birth, it says U.S. citizens only apply. Like, that's what it says across the top of the page. And it's like really small print. I'm like, well, that's a way to comb out. That's a way to keep it. Huh. Yeah, but funny enough.
And you applied anyway.
Well, okay, so you've segued me into it, and I'm going to tell it anyway. So my best friend is a gentleman by the name of Todd Zimmerman, who I also recommend at some point you interview, because he is an interesting guy who's been in the circus world for a long time. He and I had known each other for a while. We were what you would call teenage clowns, not together at all. And, I learned to unicycle and juggle when I was a kid, and there was no circus schools. There was no circus camps. That's how old I am. He did the same thing, and we found each other. And through a wide variety of things, he ended up auditioning for clown college. And I happened to be with him on the road trip while he was doing these auditions. And getting into clown college, they handed us the two applications. I read U.S. citizens, and I said, sorry, I'm Canadian. And they said, oh. And then I went off, and Todd and I were razzing each other while we filled out the application, as one does. And they overheard our chemistry, and they said, why don't you audition anyway? Maybe we can find a loophole. And sure enough, we both got in. The irony is that I got in just simply because I happened to be with Todd. But Todd ended up asking me if he could do a piece that I do. It's sort of this pantomime piece that I do on a regular basis. And I wasn't going to be using it because I wasn't auditioning. And I said, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then come time for like, hey, does anyone want to showcase anything? They said, so who wants to do that piece? And I turned to Todd and I said, well, it's my piece, but it's not really my audition. So why don't you just do it? And so he did it. And so I always kind of lord over him that he got in because of my piece. But we know that's not true. He got under his own merit. So we both went to clown college, which was really fun. I got to go to clown college with my best friend. And then I came back and I was a 15-second celebrity on Canadian news for being the first Canadian to ever do something in the United States.
Ever. It's you and Celine Dion. And
that's what it is. It's like, congratulations, you did something. And then that went away. And there I was, this sort of newly minted clown, young and ambitious. And I didn't know what to do with myself because I didn't want to go run away and join Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. I was definitely a black sheep amongst black sheep. And Todd had already run.
Why not?
Well, frankly, it was so American. I saw the merit of those clowns. I'm not going to ever dump on any of those guys because they're my friends. But the they'll also.
But you're going to dump on America.
No, I'm going to dump on America because it just deserves it every now and then. No, but I found that the styling of the clown was sort of that, balloon animal. Not that they do birthday thing, but they were there for color. They were there for sparkle, and they weren't allowed to be comedic as much as they were just put out there for decoration. Three-ring arena circus, and the clowns are iconic. And you get this big garish makeup, and there's a lot of and a lot of like larger than life attitude. I think there's definitely merit in that, but I was far more interested in street performing and comedy. I mean, that's sort of what is my bread and butter is comedy. I love comedy, and clowning is sort of almost just a means to an end for creativity on that part. I mean, if you want to get down to it, this is like a core of the interview is that circus is just that for me. It's a means to an end. It's the best voice that I have found so far to be able to do what I want to do creatively as a director and as a clown and as that kind of stuff. So circus is the medium that I like to work in. But prior to
circus is the means to an wait. I can't let this go because this is interesting to me right now. You say circus is a means to an end to do what you want to do as a director.
Yeah. Prior to going to clown college, I went to art college and I studied production design, and I was looking into being an animator because I loved cartoons and I loved the idea of bringing drawings to movement to life. I loved that kind of stuff. But the pacing of cartoons is not as instantly gratifying as the pacing of clowning. To be a visual artist, there is a level I really like time to myself to draw and to create that way. I like to go away and design, but when push comes to shove, I like to be collaborating. I mean, I just love the collaborative process. I love that the best idea wins. I love that there's a guiding star as a director and that you just sort of point to that star, but somebody else might get there before you because they just have a better idea. So I have these like sort of Jesse's rules and one of them is the best idea wins. That's one of my things I say all the time.
The best idea wins.
Best idea wins.
Okay.
And usually
actually
because I'm the director, but I'm always open to I'm always open to being disagreed with, and I'm always open to a good counterbalance.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting kind of like question of the rule is like, how do you know who has the best idea? What's the litmus test for best?
I think that when you're in those talks, you have to go away from an idea to come back to it, and you come up with a different angle. It's a discussion point, and then there's always this sort of illumination. And being the director, I have a vision of the show, but it's not my show. The show is being done by artists for an audience. So I really have a fundamental reaction to directors that have vision that is their vision. And I think that's where a lot of directors frustrate a lot of circus artists because
I love it.
Yeah. I just think that the type of personality that's drawn to circus is not someone who wanted to follow the script. This is not, they didn't want regular education. Circus is already weird and different, and it's always been on the fringe of society. It's the street performer / under a tent kind of thing. Like it's never really fit into conformed ways of thinking. And so when you're that kind of person, and then you add the risk taking kind of personality, like the people who like danger, who like to the risk taking of emotion, even then you enter into this whole other personality. And those kind of people, if you say, okay, this is the way it's done and this is the way it's only done, the parts that they'll say yes to is the parts that serve their needs. Like, this is the technique to do a hand balance. Oh, okay, well, I like hand balance, therefore I need to learn that technique. But if you say you're going to do technique with this attitude, they're like, you don't get to tell me my attitude. I already have an attitude. And I noticed that in my working for the 20 some odd years that I've been working as a director, that it is best as a director in circus, part of the language that you need to learn that's different from dance and theater and other live performance is understanding that the circus artist's voice is not equal to, but it has weight and it needs to be incorporated. Otherwise, the circus artist, you can see it. And you've seen enough circus shows. You've seen circus artists that don't give a crap about the show. And they come out and they do their act, and they do it with the right technique, and they do it with diploma, and then they bow or they do the transition. But you can see the vacancy in their eyes. You can see that they're just not engaged in this because it wasn't their idea, or they weren't engaged to make it their idea. And I think as a director, part of your job in circus is to serve the artists and allow the audience to see the joy of doing circus through the artist's eyes, that they actually enjoy every moment being on stage, not just the trick that they did, but the everything. the entrance, the exit, the interactions, those little quirky moments that come out of doing a show again and again. Because you're always going to do the same routine. It's all the other stuff that pads around it that become really interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear then, because it sounds like you're talking about like the artist as artist and then the technique and kind of bringing an element of joy or purpose or collaborating with the artist to make the technique have that color of whatever the artist wants it to be. Where does character come to play?
I had the epiphany. It's funny you should say that. Someone asked me recently, a circus artist I was working with, and he said, "What's my character?" And this is not black and white, carved in stone kind of statement, but I've now leaned more away from the term character and more towards the word personality. I don't care about your character. I care about the personality. If you're a juggler, you're a dime a dozen juggler. I want to know who you are as a juggler. That specific person on stage. That's who I care about. Because I now that I can watch how many people do circus on YouTube, I don't care. Make me care about you. And character plays into that because we relate to characters. And so you find sort of archetypical ways to break down your personality so that it can appeal to maybe a larger mass or at least a majority of people so they can connect and relate to you. But really, going contrary to someone's personality really doesn't help them perform better. Because they're not actors. Most circus people are not actors. They're not even dancers.
Yeah.
They're circus artists. They want to get good at the thing that they got good at. And your job as a director is to service that. And so you make it accessible by saying, hey, I've noticed that you have a sense of, you're a real, I don't know, give me a personality type. You have someone who's very resistant or someone who has a downtrodden kind of attitude. Well, you highlight
like an Eeyore-esque kind of
Eeyore-esque. Well, you highlight that. You don't hide it. You don't ask them to be the happy, happy, joy, joy. And then you write the show accordingly. The great thing I love about circus is that you write it from the inside out. You're not given a script. At the most, you're given a theme or you come up with a theme and you try and find vision and puzzle it together. And if you're doing it really well, you're incorporating everyone else's patch to stitch into this quilt that we're doing. That's a whole bunch of mixed metaphors I threw at you.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I love this. I love you saying you build it from the inside out or you write it from the inside out, right?
Yeah.
And so if that's true, because like if you're an actor and you're a director of a theater production, you have a script, you have Glass Menagerie, which is an American South play.
Yes, I know. I know it well.
Okay.
Did have to
just wanted to make sure because I know you're Canadian.
Yeah. No, I did have to educate myself in theater. I did grow up doing theater.
The theater, yes. Okay.
Yes, I did plays and what.
But so you know that you have the gentleman caller. You know that you have Tom. You have Laura. I can't believe I'm remembering all this. But you have these roles that you can cast. Whereas if you're building something from the inside out, how do you know who you need?
This is another sort of Jesseism, is that you're looking at the emotional spectrum. What you're wanting is, again, not necessarily personalities, because you could be a whole happy cast. I've done shows where every member of the cast was so sweet that it was diabetically saccharine. It was just so like, oh my God, there was no conflict amongst them. I couldn't create a conflict. I'm always looking for those nuance, like, it's not that they don't like each other in real life, but maybe they have their character, I say in air quotes, would have on stage a conflictual nature with this other person. But really, when everyone gets along, you're like, so now where's the confrontation? And conflict makes story. We all know this. I'm going to get back to answering your question, is that I tend to write a show on both the language of the disciplines that I need, or very often, because I'm a freelance director, I'm handed the ingredients already. So I'll be handed the disciplines that I've given. I'm like, okay, so what's the emotional reaction to this discipline? And so if it's teeterboard, that has a wow factor. It's got a danger factor. It's got a gasp.
Is that what you mean by the language of the discipline?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hot topic going around. Well, it was last year, a couple of years ago, was the dramaturgy of circus. And like so many things, the real world is looking over the fence at circus and trying to figure out how it works, because now, of course, there's camps and you can go to a studio and take fitness, and circus is really accessible now. And it didn't used to be. It used to be very, very closed culture, very, family driven, that kind of stuff. And not that long ago. So you're looking at this complete shift in the dichotomy of how circus behaves and how it's accessible. And so you're trying to educate people. But the part that you're not seeing is that, not you personally, I'm just saying the general public, is that that humans, muggles, regular folk, don't know that how much a circus person defines themselves as the circus artist, which is the discipline that they do. When you say, "What are you?" they say, "I am a juggler." They don't.
I'm a hand
I am a
balancer.
hand.
I'm an
I am
aerialist.
that thing. There is no separating the work from the person. They are that thing. They embody. That's what they are. And so,
and if you're another circus artist and someone says you're a juggler, usually I will go, "Oh yeah, that makes sense."
yeah, and you know the personality types that are driven towards
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, there's a whole psychology of which disciplines draw in, and so you've got this wide variety of different personalities within a very small tent, so to speak, and from that you can extrapolate quite a palette of tools to write a show. I mean, really, if you want to boil it all down to, it's the psychology of circus. If I was ever to write a book, I think I would want to get into the psychology of circus, because the types of discipline create the types of personalities, and those personalities create character, and that creates an emotional link to the audience, and that drives the show. As a director, again, you want the spectrum of it all. You want a nice sigh, peaceful moment. You want a big heart thumping moment. You want a laughter. You actually want sometimes a confrontation that the audience feels engaged. And more than anything, and this is again one of my fundamentals as a director, is that circus has the opportunity to wow an audience. And wow doesn't mean just spectacle. Wow can be an emotional shift. You transpose someone from how they're feeling, and people don't give up emotional control easily. It's why laughter is the hardest thing to get. We're all control freaks, and we resist and resist and resist. And the second you can get everybody in the room to feel the same emotion, the heartbeats synchronize and the whole room shifts. And all of a sudden we've had a very human moment, and circus was the catalyst. And the only way to do that is by piercing the fourth wall and reaching across the ring curb and really bringing the audience into that experience. And so that's where I think circus is a very different medium from theater. And dance has done a lot of this, and theater has done a lot of this. But I think circus has this one thing, which is this high risk factor. So these people could get hurt doing what they're doing. And so that makes it very real and very visceral. So yeah, that's why I like circus more than anything, because you have this great palette.
So you said that you are a freelance director. Can you explain what that means?
When I went to clown college, it was a year where they were revolutionizing clown college, so to speak. And it was, so Steve Smith, sweetest person on the planet, was the director.
Who was also on the podcast, actually.
Oh, there we go.
Go back. Yeah, Steve was on an early episode. I want to say he was like episode somewhere in the 20s. I'll put it in the show notes. You guys can go back.
No worries.
Yeah.
One of the most charming human beings you've ever met.
Lovely.
Yeah. And again, just so sweet. He had been kicked out as the director of clown college. He'd led it for so many years. And I was the year right afterwards. And what was happening was Ringling Brothers was getting nervous about this new institute called Cirque du Soleil coming up the pipeline as being a powerhouse as far as stealing ticket and seats from Ringling Brothers. So in the classic corporate move, they were like, well, how do we compete? Not artistically, but they thought, oh, Cirque du Soleil's got this nouveau Cirque thing going on, this very European thing. What can we do to match that? Because that's, again, corporate thinking. And so they decided to do away with Steve Smith, unfortunately, and try to overhaul clown college to be a more European clown-like experience. So without losing the fundamentals of Ringling Brothers clown techniques, which is fundamental clown techniques. So I lucked out. I had I got to work with Steve years later, but they really threw everything at us. They at one point we tried to do the ratio that of the 30 students that got accepted into clown college, I think there was like 60 instructors or more. So there was almost it was almost 2 to 1. And I could name drop like crazy. I didn't know who any of these people were at first, but people like, David Shiner, David Larife, Bill Irwin, these were my instructors, right? Yeah. And I got exposed to all these guys. Javi Burgess was my juggling instructor. Javi Burgess. Like, I'm like, I don't know. So lots and lots of people. And here I was this 21-year-old kid at clown college, and they were throwing everyone at us. And one of the things that they threw at us was that one of the co-directors that year was Rob Merman, who's the founder of Circus Smirkus. And I happened to go to clown college the same year as Troy Wonderly, who he and I ended up working for years together at Smirkus. That's how that whole link happened. But they were really, at one point, to answer your question, I've gone so far away from it. The reason I started to I loved directing. I knew I loved directing. I'd done a little bit of theater directing in my earlier years. And I realized I really could speak circus, and I really loved the collaborative process. I really liked listening to the artists and trying to throw challenges at them and raising the bar. But I noticed, and Rob Merman was the one who said it, he said, never start your own circus company. Because what'll happen is all the reasons that you started it will go away because you'll have to do all the reasons to keep it alive. So you end up becoming an administrator, and you end up becoming an artistic director of a company rather than actually being on the ground, working with the artists, directing your shows. Now, Rob lucked out. His company was young enough. He got to direct shows and be in them and stuff like that. But by the time I joined Smirkus, it was a large enough organization that you weren't able to wear all those hats. You were either, running the company, or you were down on the ground making things happen. And then I also was talking to Paul Binder a few years later, and he said, never buy a tent. It's the worst thing you could ever do. And so it's really funny to listen to these guys that did these things, and they don't say it with regret. They sort of say it kind of as in, avoid the pitfall. If this is what you want to be doing, go do that. And I knew that if I wanted to direct, I would need to go and get other people to hire me. And everyone else I know, as you mentioned, like the Seven Fingers and Cirque du Soleil, they're all people. They're all artists who wanted to start their own circus so they could direct their own shows. And I've always, as a freelancer, been directing other people's shows. So my voice is definitely in there, and my style is definitely in there. But it's sort of I serve up a la carte a circus show based on the parameters. And this will be I don't know if you want to go in this direction, but that's how I approach circus far more as a designer than as an artist.
Oh my God. I had a direction I wanted to go, and now I want to go in this direction. So let me ask you this first, because I know this is on.
We can put in the designer thing, and we'll come back to it.
Yeah, no, I kind of just clicked. I was like, oh, I got Jesse at 4. My assistant Hannah told me I get to talk to Jesse. Going to talk to Jesse. Logged in, started talking. So I have no idea where this interview is going to go.
No problem.
But I do want to ask, because I know I've had a couple of questions about this actually from people online and other places. You talk about how all these people who wanted to become circus directors wound up running their own companies and doing a lot of admin work, or trying to figure out where to store a tent over the winter or whatever else.
Right.
So how did you do it?
My father gave me a really good piece of advice a long time ago. My father's a carpenter and cabinet maker, and he watched my career. And there was a point where I was ready to give up, and then he wasn't not encouraging. He was paternal in the way that he went, well, I guess then you don't want to do it. And he started to put the chat, well, I guess if you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. And I went, oh, no, screw you. I'm going to go do that, Dad. And, so there's that little bit of rebellion. Like, I'm not going to give up because I said I'm going to give up. Screw you.
So his advice was,
if you're
going to give up, you don't want to do it.
Yeah. But at the same time, he said, well, if you want to go work for Cirque du Soleil, go start sweeping their floors. And I learned very quickly that's an old way of thinking. I love my father, but I disagree. Because if I learned to sweep the floors at Cirque du Soleil, all I learned to do is become a better floor sweeper.
Yes.
It's not like someone's going to notice me. And so the best piece of advice I ever got was be at the bottom of the ladder you want to climb, and know that ladder, and know that if you want to move laterally from ladder to ladder, you got to be very careful, because ladders can be precarious depending on how high. Sometimes you have to climb down a few rungs, move over, and then climb back up. So be at the bottom of the ladder you want to climb. And I wanted to be a director. I wanted to learn my craft, and I wanted to be very good at it and efficient at it. And I wanted to solve problems in a very safe place where I could fail with a support structure. Because if you start your own company and your first show sucks, you're going to be bailing yourself out from there on in. And that's the risk you take. So I guess I was hedging my bets is really what was happening. And then,
so what was your first directing job?
I was actually for a camp a long time ago. But
all right.
To answer your question, where I really learned was with Circus Smirkus, because I learned that a lot of directing circus has to do with logistics. And so when you put on a circus camp with a bunch of kids, and this is at camp, I was learning how to do just shows with parents that were showing up. So the audience was very safe. They're going to cheer anyway. It's their kid. But I put the challenge to myself to be able to put an artistic spin on it, to make sure that the kids were involved, make sure that there was a collaboration with the coaches, make sure that there was a formula to the show, that it was designed in such a way, back to the design thing, where the formula worked, and that it felt like a well-rounded show rather than a recital. And because parents fall asleep in recital. So how do you keep parents engaged when it's not their kid on stage. That becomes the design challenge. If I'm not looking at my kid, why should I care? So how do you engage the audience at a level where they're going to care about the show, not just their kid? So that was the first kind of lesson that I learned, is how do you engage the audience at all levels and from beginning to end, so that when they walk out, they go, that was a great show, rather than, I really love my child. And then when I moved over to Smirkus Tour, I had all kinds of great challenges thrown at me there, too many to count. And I directed the shows for a decade. And in those 10 years, the learning curve was quite steep. And I had to be able to produce a show. Our rehearsal period got, whittled down to, I think our record was we got a show up and running in 21 days. And it was a custom show from the ground up. And people are amazed at that in the industry, that they go see our shows and they think, oh yeah, that's fine. And I'm very proud of the work that I do with Circus Smirkus.
Wait a second. Okay, Circus Smirkus, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, is in the US. I think it's the only touring youth circus in America. Yeah. Right? Is that correct?
There's a lot of other youth circuses that have popped up. It's one of the oldest youth circuses that have been around, but it is the only one that has a big top tour. It has a camp component that is a separate entity where kids can go away and do circus camp for like 2 weeks or 1 week. But what happens is, tour, you audition as a young performer between the ages of 10 and 18, and you get in, and we take about 30 per season. And like I said,
but do those kids, like when you say like you put together a show in 21 days, those kids already come in with acts, right?
No.
What?
Not even. No, I design all the acts. I work with my coaches. They design the acts with me. Costumes are made from square one. Lighting, music. What? The big one is music. Music, all that music that we've had for all those years, it gets made with the great man that I love working with, Tristan Moore. Shout out to him. Definitely a muse that I worked with. I love working with him because he was the audio and I was the visual. But yeah, no, that astonishment that you have on your face right now, we made everything from scratch. And it meant that I had to have my ducks in a row when I walked in. I'm just my first word. I had to fucking know what I was doing, because there's no time to waste. And here to add to the twist to this, we used to allow. They don't do it anymore. They've even hedged it even more. The system that I helped create, they've even shaved off even more. I used to allow for like 2 days where the kids didn't have to go to the normal act that they wanted to go to. They got to re-audition for disciplines that they didn't. I called them surprise days, because I never, a kid comes in and he's a juggler, but maybe he or she has a capacity to be a bass in hand to hand. And so that's how I fostered new talent. That's how I was able to round out the show more, so that you didn't just come in and think that you may have auditioned as a juggler, but it turns out you're really good at hand balance. And so we're going to start you on hand balance. And maybe you don't do the act this year, but you're going to go to all the rehearsals. And so that next year when you audition again, I know that your talent pool is that much bigger. And that's where Circus Smirkus is really both a pedagogical experience, and that's the teacher in me, and also a professional circus experience, because the more you can do, the more you're involved in the show. So you get these really multi-talented kids. I will say I've loved working with professionals, but working with youth circus, the hunger you get from youth is incomparable. Where I learned to direct very quickly, I had to make decisions very decisively, and I had to know what I was doing. I had to have a vision, and I had to fight for it sometimes. There were definitely times where you stand up to the powers that be that are financing it, and you go, "You're wrong. I will bet my job on this." And they turn an eyebrows up. They go, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, if this doesn't work, you get to fire me." And luckily, I never had to do that. So
yeah. So I want to talk about some of this vision and some of this design. I think the most helpful way to do this for an audience is kind of to use an example of a past concept or idea you've had.
Sure.
And so take me from the hatchling, if we're going to use a metaphor, of the idea. Like, where does it start? How do you grow it? Oh no, now I'm mixing metaphors.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. Welcome to the
when you set it out, kick it out of the nest. Like, what is that process like?
Let's talk in design terms. Like any design, I would get a brief. I'll talk about one of my more recent projects with Cirque Eloise. The brief was, I forget how many artists, 8 artists. Here are the disciplines. So I had nothing to do with casting. I had nothing to do with any of the disciplines that had been chosen. All of these things I was just handed, and then it was sort of make it work. And then the show needs to be X amount of time. So you're just given so many parameters. And we all know, and this is part of the reason why I love directing circus, is that creativity works really well against boundaries, right? So the second you're given some sort of confinement, you either try a way to work around it or work with it. You're either congruent or contrasting it. So it's fantastic that you're given these challenges, and they're like, okay, so I have 8 artists. It's a family show. It's a half hour long. They're going to do it 3 times a day. So that's a factor that I have to weigh in because I can't exhaust my artists. And then that they wanted a lumberjack theme and for a theme park that's down in the States. And I think there were other parameters that I was handed. I quickly go to work, and because I went to art college before clown college and circus, I work a lot in storyboard. I like to illustrate my shows, and it's usually a doodle of I'll draw the set, and then I'll start to draw in the act. And it's a great communication device for everybody. So I'll come in and I'll pitch a rough version of the show. It's sort of a pencil drawing, so to speak, even though the drawings aren't in pencil, they're in color. And I'll tape them up on the wall. If I have samples of the music, that was another thing. I had to use the music from Cirque du Soleil's Saloon. So that was one of the other parameters. So already my music was chosen for me. But I didn't have to stick to, they use this music for teeterboard. Well, I could use that music for a different discipline, which I did, which was really funny because the people from Cirque du Soleil, they were so acclimated to hearing that music being associated to a certain discipline, to see it being done to a different discipline. They're like, yeah, but that's sad music. I go, no, it's not sad music. It's music that you associate to being sad. But if you actually listen to the music, it's actually quite mysterious, or it's actually quite, beautiful or whatever. And so then being the idiot artist that I am, this is where the artistic component comes in, is I like to challenge myself. So I'll look at all the other parameters, and then I'll go, what else is missing is this. And I'll pick the X factor of what I want the show to be. Another factor to this particular project was there was no backdrop. The entire backdrop was one LCD screen. So it was a giant screen that we could, and we were given a certain amount of budget that I was allowed to do. I forget how it worked. It was I was allowed to do animation. I could do 2 animations or 6 slides. And I had to choose really quick what I wanted to do. And so sometimes that just, once you can answer one question, you start answering other questions. And I lucked out. I've been very fortunate in my career, the fact that I had nothing to do with casting, but I lucked out on some fantastic people. I think we all know what it's like to work with difficult people. And I really lucked out on a cast that was just wonderfully charitable in their energy. I would brag about the 21 Days of Smirkus. That particular show, I came in very well prepared. It took me about a week to prepare it, and I put a video together and pitched that video to the artists and to the producers. And then I did a live pitch to the company so that they could understand what they were marketing, and so that they could back. And it helps the technicians see. And they're I'm basically, this is a moment from the act that we're going to see. And I have done that, what you're talking about, which is put together my own show with storyboards and pitch. And go cold. I've never done a cold open, though. I would like to. Oh, no, that's not true. I did do that. I did do that with Big Apple. They were looking at me because they really liked what Circus Smirkus was doing, and they wanted some of that flavor, and someone pointed them in my direction because they said I was the one who made that happen, and I'm grateful to that person. And so reputation, as you know, is everything in circus. So I sat down with Big Apple, and I pitched them a show, and I made a few drawings, and they liked it. And then, of course, they promptly went out of business. So the year I was supposed to direct was the year that they folded. And of course, now they're back in business, and no one's called me. But, anyone listening from Big Apple, I'm available if you want. I digress. But yeah, when I do the pitches, I use it mainly as to get it out of my head and to communicate and to get that vision. But what I was going to tell you is, to cap the story, that show we put together in 4 days. 5, really.
Wow.
We were given 2 weeks.
Okay.
We were given 2 weeks to put the show together. But after the first week, all of the equipment was going to get shipped to the theme park. So that meant that the teeter board and all our props and all our stuff was already in a manifesto and on a truck and gone. So the only thing we could do after that was we worked on clown stuff, choreography. And so that's part of the learning from camp. What do you need to rehearse, and what can you rehearse? Just the purely design logistics of what can you get done in a rehearsal period. And so you go, well, if all the equipment leaves on Thursday, then I guess the next week all we're doing is working on transitions and choreography. And so the artists have to know that, and you have to communicate that, because they're like, well, what happens when I'm done my act? I'm like, oh, we'll figure that out next week, because right now is the only time that we have the teeter board. So let's put that act together.
So it sounds like there's an aspect. I guess you said this earlier about time management and logistics.
Very much.
It's important for circus
Very
directors.
much so. I think that if you're going to be a good director, you have to almost be a good stage manager as far as I love having a stage manager. They keep me from having to think about all the crap I have to. I mean, you have an assistant and you know, it saves you from having to think about the other stuff that you don't want to have to think about. And they catch a lot of fly balls for you. I also love having a producer, but at the end of the day, you're shouldering the whole show. And so you want to make sure that your artists are happy. I really also, there's another fundamental thing. I really have a visceral reaction when I find out that the creation of a show was traumatic to the artists. And that seems to be you hear about it often, where it's, oh my God, it was so rough, or, oh my God, you know, it nearly broke me. And I'm like, well, that must have sucked, since we all love circus. And I understand that there's going to be frustrations and conflict and confrontation, but really, you were near suicide by the time the show was up. They nearly broke me. And you hear a lot about that in artistic people. And I think that's the direction.
And I don't know if it's a confirmation bias or not, but you can kind of tell those shows.
Yeah.
Like, go in and like, something's not right here.
Yeah. You see a show where the director had this vision and then just constrained the performers into it. You know, you're just going to do what I want you to because it's my fucking show. And you're like, well, that way to collaborate, first of all. But okay, I get it. You're using them to get your vision. That's fine. But even the best film directors know that the actor has to bring something. They're not just tools. They're people. And at the end of the day, they're the thing that is connecting to the other people. You're not on stage, so it's not your voice. And the best shows that I've seen that go through a terrible creation process, the second the director leaves, the artists start to own it. And then it becomes their show, and then it relaxes, and then all the kinks work out, and all that crap that they went through finally dissipates. But I just fundamentally believe that you don't have to go through that to get the product that you're looking for, to get the results you're looking for. I don't think suffering is part of art. You do straps, you know how much your arms suffer. That's suffering enough as far as I'm concerned. You know, you don't have to emotionally be raked across the coals in order to come out the other side knowing yourself. I think circus, I know a lot of directors that disagree with me, but I don't think circus is ever not meant to be enjoyed. And if this was like a YouTube video, I'd probably get lots of comments on that just disagree with me. Because I
mean, I'm sure there are people who are like screaming at their radios right now, but we can't. Radios. Yeah, no one has a radio. Whatever. Smartphone. Why did I just say radio?
They're screaming at whatever audio, their Bluetooth speaker. They're screaming at their Bluetooth speaker.
There it is. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so here's a question, or find contradictory. Yeah. Is this idea of vision, right? And you say it's a deeply collaborative thing with your artists.
Yeah.
But then you talk about with producers or financiers having to really fight for it and dig in.
Yeah.
And these two things seem to be a little contradictory to me. Like, how much do you let artists, like, how much is the vision yours, and how precious is it to you?
How precious is it? So when I teach directing, and I say this, I said, your job as the director is to defend the vision at all costs. That doesn't mean that you don't incorporate ideas, because you might not know all the ideas that are going to support your vision. If you know what the vision is, if you have a very strong vision, and the vision can be very distant, it might not even be in focus. But the thing that confuses artists the most is when you change your mind so frequently. And you just start, we've all seen directors that you can see shows where the director said yes too many times. I think it's a constant negotiation of yes and no. Often it's not no, but it's no, but. Hey, what if we do it this way? And you go, no, but you're close. I think that the tone you're looking for is this. And that's the reason I know this is because I'm on the outside looking in. I'm the director. I'm the audience's experience, not the artist's experience. And artists, ultimately the artist wants to feel like their experience is important. And so you have to make it important to them. You have to make it feel like it's important at least. And it is, but really the audience's experience is far more important.
Thank you for coddling our fragile egos. Well, that's really the role of the director.
You're going to do it 20 times. You're going to do it 200 times, how many times you're going to do it. I can't manufacture care. I can't force you to care about. So I have to figure out what you care about doing it. Do you care about the technique? Of course. Do you care about the audience applauding? You do, actually. As much as there are artists out there that go, no, I don't need this. I'm doing a fake cigarette. Why the hell are you on stage if you're not there to interface with the audience?
That's such a good point.
Like, that's the medium. Go do YouTube videos if you don't give a shit if the audience responds or not. Seriously, you're in, and this is a dirty word, you're in the entertainment business. Your job is to, whether it's artistic and sad or jubilant and celebrational, your job is to transpose an audience. That's why you got into it. At one point, and I'm going to rant here, at some point, you were sitting in the audience watching a circus, and somewhere deep inside your core, a bell rang, and it resonated through your soul. And you went, I want to be part of that. Not just I'm enjoying it, but you went, I want to be part of that. I want to go to there, to quote Tina Fey. And you did everything in your ability to get to there. And I don't know which circus show you saw, which company it was. It doesn't matter. Most often circus artists today, young circus artists especially, saw a show and it resonated with them, and they were magnetically drawn to the industry. And what I think is interesting is they go, it's a chance for my voice. They want their voice to be heard on stage. And you go, that's great, because there's so many soloists now. You go, guess what? I want you to be a choir. And because most of you have learned to be solo singers, you don't know what it's like to harmonize. So I'm going to ask you to harmonize. And therein lies the challenge. And what ends up happening is most artists discover that they actually really like harmonizing. In fact, that's what drew them to the circus in the first place, was that they saw that you were part of a greater thing. It wasn't just your individuality. It was that the fact that your individuality was valued by the greater group. And so you're a contributor, not a soloist. That is, for me, the challenge when dealing with artists, is that I'm going to put the challenge to you that, yes, I'm going to make all your talents shine, but I'm also going to ask you to make room for other people on stage.
And make room, it sounds like, for the audience.
Well, and most importantly, make room for the audience.
Because I think what you said that people are going to be yelling at their Bluetooth speakers about is this idea of circus as entertainment. And it's kind of I will say a moire. I would say like the overarching theme or exploration of this podcast is, what is artist? What is athlete? Where do we meet? Where do we diverge? Right. But then also art versus entertainment in circus.
Well, and I think,
and this discussion.
Yeah, I think that the word entertainment has been misappropriated in that it's seen as glossy, plastic, it has a soulless, that it's processed cheese, and that entertainment has that sense of, and I when I say the word entertainment, I say it as distracting people. I'm much more broad. You're more or less distracting people from their mundane lives. You're basically asking them to not think about their babysitter or their taxes or the fight they had with their spouse in the car ride. You're asking them to forgo their brain space and make room for this other thing. And you want to engage them to the point where they're not thinking about that stuff. And to me, that's actually what entertainment is you've distracted their brain to not think about life, to think about this thing. And so that's when I use the word entertainment. I use it that way. And you could easily swap out the word art. I think that for me, where you get into art, having gone to art college, we all know the term art for art's sake. Well, then I go, well, art for art's sake, that's entertainment. If you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, then you're into that plastic word of entertainment. And it's also, where does art and design overlap? Design has...
Well, I'm not sure I would agree with you, actually, because sometimes art for art's sake is not about being entertaining. Sometimes there are people who want you to confront the fact that all your life is your taxes and a babysitter, and they really want to throw in your face in some way. And I'm not saying that you do or circus should or anything like that, but I do think that there's another purpose other than to distract.
I think what you and I are...
That is art.
Yeah, what we're boiling down to is that art, design, entertainment, all of that, whatever those, which pick your word, it's designed to engage humans on a fundamental level of thought. You're more or less just trying to provoke thought. I have an exercise that I do with circus artists where I ask them, what is your purpose? What is your design mandate? And I was recently teaching over at Dock in Sweden, and they came up with a great one. Unfortunately, I'm going to butcher it, but it was to use the circus arts to provoke audience, to provoke reaction. And there's more to it, but we basically tried to boil down a design statement for what is a circus artist's purpose. And I think we inverted, was to provoke a reaction using the circus arts. That can encompass art, that can encompass, I think that it's really limiting. I know I just talked about limits make for creativity, but I think it's really limiting when you try and put a definition on something that is so vast as circus. I think that when you say circus, and your version of circus and my version of circus might overlap, but there's also circus that you enjoy that I don't enjoy. And I say that to people listening, and there's shows that I've walked out of that I am amazed that people pay for. And, and I'm sure that I've directed shows that people go that, you know, that they either don't want to say anything mean about it, or it just wasn't their cup of tea. It's all about engaging the public. It's all about, and I use the word engaging because I think entertaining is misheard. I don't think it's the right word. And I think I try to avoid art because I think art is also misheard. I think people have their own version of what they think art is supposed to move me, or art is supposed to provoke thought. And I go, or art is supposed to be beautiful. Again, art is such a vast word. And I love when people throw on prefixes to words like nouveau cirque or neo circus, or, you know, contemporary circus, the great touchstone of debate. And I go, why can't it just be circus? Why can't we all just know that it's there and we can move forward with whatever we want to be doing? Because I don't think the definition should be what we're looking at. It should be the craft of circus we should be looking at.
No, and I think those kinds of discussions are also not really, I mean, practitioners have them, but I think that it's more academics and outside eye that really pursue those questions.
Yeah, and they're never going to come to an answer until they start listening to the artists. So let them have their like I've sat in on those. My wife has got her master's in circus education, and she's now the head of the Bachelor of Circus Arts over at Doc.
Her name is Alisan Funk. She's also been on the podcast. I don't remember what episode she was on either, but
so now
I'll put it in the show notes.
She runs a program at Doc over in Sweden, and she's having these debates all the time because she's an academic, but she's working directly with artists and trying to find their voice and stuff.
Do you think, even though you are kind of a gun for hire, that you have a style? Like when people hire you, do they know they're getting like the Jesse Dryden experience? And how would you define that?
Yeah, I would definitely say I have a style. It took me a long time to escape the youth circus trappings. I was the guy that could always work with kids, which I challenge any, adult director to do because,
I would never.
I remember.
I mean, I'm not a director, but I don't.
Yeah, I remember talking to Gypsy Snyder. She said to me once, she goes, "I could never do what you do," and I'm like, "Oh, that's too bad because I'd like to do what you do." And so, I think it's a great training ground because you're dealing with even more fragile egos and you're dealing with self-esteem constantly, and there's a whole drama. But you end up learning that there's some fundamental similarities between teenagers and adults that work on stage. And some the temper tantrums are exactly the same. I think some people never outgrew it. But to answer your question, I definitely think I have a style. I was greatly inspired by Franco Dragone. I liked the idea that you curate a circus show.
Oh, interesting.
My job is to frame you so that your art piece looks well hung in the room and it's lit properly and that it fits into the tempo of the show so that when the audience comes walking from one room to another room, they feel that they're getting a shift and an experience and that it's I like the word well framed. Some of Franco Dragone's earlier Cirque du Soleil shows, which Cirque du Soleil has never been able to manufacture since they've tried. You take a photo of them and freeze frame it, and it's so well balanced as an art piece. It's as a still image. He's got just enough red in the bottom corner that leads your eye up to the red on the hat of the wire walker, and the lights have to be highlight. Like he sees it as a painting. And that's why I use animation as a very strong parallel. That's why I use storyboards when I direct. Every moment of a show, I love the audience's breath to be impacted. I talk a lot about breath when I'm teaching clown, but I also, when I teach circus, about getting the audience to breathe with you.
So what is your style? How would you describe it?
I like to set tones, and that tone isn't just what's on stage. That tone goes right back to what I was talking about, which is the collaborative tone. And that's my style. Yeah. It's very obvious that the artist, if I've done my job right, the artists feel like it's their show and it's their show to give to the audience. It's not my show. It's their show. At some point I go from pulling the show to pushing the show, and they're up in front. I definitely love a lot of humor in my shows. Very rarely have I ever written a show without something that makes the audience laugh.
I do think that you have to allow an audience to laugh before you can make them cry.
Yes.
Or there has to be like an up before a down can be allowed. And my question is, because you started this interview off kind of introducing and talking about your time in clown college, and it makes sense how you could know comedic timing and all of that. What or how do you learn beauty to create that on stage?
What a wonderful question. How do you learn beauty? How do you learn beauty? Great question. I don't know that. I don't know the right answer to that. I'm going to have to, I'd have to like, can we pause and let me think about that for a while?
Yeah, you can, you can take it. I'm not doing anything else today. There's nothing else to be done.
It's such a cheesy answer, but beauty is observing nature. It's finding beauty in moments. It's finding beauty in pain. Not that I think that I'm going contrary to what I said, but I don't think rehearsal periods have to be painful. I think that if I say an emotion, your brain will access that the memory of that emotion, but my memory and your memory of that particular emotion are two different things. So if I say, the last time you had your heart broken, immediately you and I can sit there and commiserate about what it means to get your heart broken, but I don't know your situation and you don't know mine, but we do know what heartbreak feels like. So there's beauty in that, being able to connect like that and learning that. I don't know. I think you have to have had either a very terrible childhood or a really great childhood.
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking like the director that I can think of who I think captures beauty best, circus director, is probably Daniele Finzi-Pasco.
Yeah, he's another great inspiration. Yeah, definitely.
I think that when I think of beauty on stage, I think of the end of Rain.
Yeah.
Or I think of that the moment in that show that I think is the most beautiful is also actually a very funny moment. But it's when they're doing the teeter board and they punch the teeter board and the girl flies off stage.
Flying off. Yeah. Or when the bald girl gets her wig ripped off in the midst of dancing.
Yes.
And it's extremely fragile. And that was a big learning moment for me when I saw that happen. I saw the original Rain way back. And I saw that wig moment and I was the only person in the audience laughing. Like it was like, my own stifling a laugh because I saw it wasn't fun. I wasn't laughing at her. I was laughing at the fact that it was so gutsy to do that or to catch. And all of the things that you're describing from just that show all have a tenderness, a surprise, and a sense of play.
That's a really good way to describe beauty, hey?
And yeah. And I think, and that brings me right back to what I think circus is you're literally watching people play. And we love watching people play. This sounds weird, but you go to a children's playground and you watch kids play and you immediately are harkened back when you used to play. Often if you're young at heart, you'll engage and you'll play as well. Humans love to play. And if you're watching circus, you're literally watching people play some of the most dangerous things they've ever played. And you're like, oh my God, I remember being that risk taker when I was younger. Now I'm watching this person walk a wire and do a backflip on a wire. My God, that was so dangerous. But they did it in a sense of both risk and play. And there's beauty in that fractionary moment. They're both in danger and they succeed. We live and die with their success. That's the beauty of circus is that shared moment. If you can work hard to create those shared moments, then string them together properly, then the audience, I think the best shows are, and you know this feeling, and I'm sure most of your audience does, when you walk out of a show and you feel just cleansed. There's like a whoo, and that show sits with you for not just days, but weeks, and even sometimes, you and I are talking about Rain right now. Like we immediately go right back to that moment where that was a great moment. And so, and you and I weren't even in the same audience, but we shared that moment.
No, actually, funny enough, I saw I saw the very last showing of Rain.
Wow.
Not the very last day, but in the last week.
Like the last week. And I'm sure it evolved and it changed. And it kept its spirit, or, how many casts of Rain have there been? And they still have to do the same show, but eventually it has to be their show. It can't be, I'm going to do exactly what the guy or the girl, the artist before me did. I'm going to do that act. I'm going to fill that time slot. But my hand balance act isn't the same as the previous hand balance act. I'm going to do it to the music, but I need that music to speak to me the way I want it to speak to me.
So, Jesse, if you don't want a company and you don't want to buy a tent, do you have...
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. So you shouldn't have a company and you shouldn't buy a tent.
I would gladly have a company if someone wants to be my if someone wants to be my executive director and take care of all the
Yeah, it sounds like
financing.
you just need an administrative staff.
Yeah, that's all I need. I never said this line, but one of the things my dad said is in the arts industry, one of the key things is to get someone else to pay for it. So I have no problem if I had my own company. That'd be great. I just want someone else to finance it and take care of the parts that I don't want to do and back me up. But that's never going to happen.
Ah, cool. Well, not with that.
Unless one of your listeners is a patron that wants to, is inspired by these words and goes, oh, there needs to be more Jesse Dryden out in the world. So
you never know.
You never know.
Never know.
Anyway, so I cut you off. If I don't want a tent and I don't want a company, what?
Yeah. What do you want to do? Is like freelance directing? Like, have you peaked?
Oh God, I hope.
I don't want to give you like an existential crisis over here.
But I hope not.
I feel like it's the next natural question. Is like,
I used to believe that I wanted to direct bigger and bigger shows, and I'm not quite 50 yet, and I kind of would like to direct a big show before I'm 50. I'd like to direct like an international touring show before I turn 50. That might be over ambitious, but
I don't think so. I'd like to see what you do with like a Cirque du Soleil budget.
Yeah.
Like
with the big toys.
Resources.
Yeah. I'd like to play like, because I so often work within the confinements of the budget or work within the confinements of the company's needs or their brand. It would be really neat to sort of be let loose, get the leash a little bit looser. I would love to play with the bigger toys.
Final question.
Go for it.
What advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
Ooh, great. Great question. You're good at this. I would tell myself, I have it. I just need to get it in the right phrasing. Something about learn to let go better. Not sooner. Learn to let go better. It would be my advice.
Yeah.
You're holding on to that idea way too hard. And it's okay. You can still hold on to it. But you just, in holding on to that idea hard, you end up not having your grip available for the next idea or being available to the next idea to even come in because there's no airspace to get in there. If you grip it too tight, you could strangle it. And then it is the dead idea. Learning to grip an idea better is the advice I would give myself. Because I learned that very, very quickly watching some of my earlier shows going, God, I should have cut that act. I don't know why I fought so hard. There's all the standard things like pick your battles. That's definitely a good piece of advice for any director. Pick your battles. Yeah.
I'll go back through and listen to this interview and write down the Jesseisms.
Sure.
That I pick up.
Yeah.
For the people.
A better idea.
Jesse, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been an absolute blast.
I know. It's super fun, right?
Yeah. Good luck with everything. And thanks to your audience, always. You would have no podcast if there was no one listening. So
it's true.
Thank you.
It's entertainment.
Always thank the audience. That's what I always say.
That was my interview with Jesse Dryden. I want to thank Jesse so much for coming on. He has been a good friend of mine for a number of years. A couple of years ago, before I started the podcast, I decided to quit performing. And he asked me what I was going to do with my life. And I told him that I was going to do absolutely nothing. He was like, oh, you're going to Kramer your life. You're going to work very hard to make sure that you never have to really work ever again. And I was like, yes, that is what I will do. And to this day, I'm still Kramering my life. So thank you, Jesse Dryden, for coming up with that description, because that's what I tell people now. When they ask me what I do, I say I am Kramering my life. I am working very hard to not do much at all. Other Jesseisms that you heard during this interview, I went through and I got about 4. So let's go through them, shall we? Yeah, we shall. Okay. The first Jesseism is that the best idea wins. And in this Jesseism kind of encapsulates this desire that Jesse has to cultivate a rehearsal space that is collaborative. So he talked a lot in the interview about certain directors who will come in film. I think they call it an auteur director, right? A director who comes in and they know exactly what the project is going to look like. They have very specific ideas about the emotional arc of the show. They have just everything's already made. And the only role of the artists in this scenario is to kind of deliver the message of the director. Jesse, in his directing approach, wants the artists to feel like the project is theirs. He says, as a director, part of his job in circus is to serve the artist, to serve the audience, and figure out what they want to say. Best idea wins. In other words, when you're directing, listen and collaborate with your artists. Second Jesseism. Look for the emotional spectrum. Circus has the opportunity, and I wrote next to this, circus has the opportunity to wow an audience. But wow doesn't just mean spectacle. It can be a whole emotional shift. This is another kind of thread that went through the interview, I feel like, where we talked about entertainment versus art versus comedy versus beauty, all these really grand ideas that all happen or should happen or have the potential to happen within a circus show. And what Jesse's desire is to look for the highs and lows within this. So looking at performers and disciplines and story and everything that can bring an emotional spectrum to life. Something that the artist can experience and the audience can observe and hopefully be very moved by. The third Jesseism I wrote down was be at the bottom of the ladder you want to climb. Be at the bottom of the ladder you want to climb. So if you want to be a director, be at the bottom of the directing ladder. Think about like all the things you can do in life or all the career paths or titles or whatever you want as ladders. And this runs contrary to this idea that like, if you want to be a director at Cirque du Soleil or if you want to run the company, you start out sweeping the floors and you work your way up. No, if you start sweeping floors, you're going to get really good at sweeping floors. If you start directing, you're going to get good at directing. There's this really great book. I wish I could remember the name of the author. I mean, I guess I could Google it, but you can Google it too. But the book is called Zen and the Art of Archery. And one of the quotes in it is, aim for the center of the target. And I think that this is very close to be at the bottom of the ladder you want to climb, right? It's this idea that if you want to do something, you have to aim for that thing. Not around it, not somewhere close to it, not in its general direction. Aim for the center of the target. And whatever you hit around it will be your shot. And you'll get better and better at shooting toward the center of the target. Just like if you are at the bottom of the directing ladder, you will climb that ladder. And climbing that ladder may make it easier to pivot and go over a rung, or you go down a rung and then to the side. He had a whole metaphor, Jesse did, that he kind of took off on. So if you're a performer, don't go teach a bunch of aerial classes. That's not what will make you a better performer. What will make you a better performer is finding opportunities to perform. I want to say one more little thing about this was kind of at the end when Jesse started to talk about how you shouldn't, if you want to be a director, don't start a circus company. If you want to be a director, don't buy a tent, all of that. And I think there's some validity to that. But I also would suggest to anyone who wants to direct or run their own company that you don't necessarily have to get stuck in that trap. But I do suggest that you take a management course or some kind of other lesson or way of learning how to delegate tasks, because arts administration is a thing. There are many people out there who are incredibly talented at organizing and letting artists be artists and taking care of other parts of the business. I think that's a really common misconception that a lot of people have about the arts. It goes along with this idea that there's not a lot of money in the arts, which relatively there's not, but if you need it, you can find it. So find it and then pay people and then get your directing on. Fight to be at the bottom of the ladder you want to climb. And then the last Jesseism that isn't really a Jesseism. I hear this said all the time, but it was a really interesting kind of thread through this interview as well when Jesse started talking about design and how that's different from art. He says, creativity works really well against boundaries. Jesse's job as a freelance director is to come in and create a show from a company that already has an idea of theme. They probably already have a cast. They probably have all of these what you could think of as parameters or boundaries or things that already exist that Jesse has to create with. And at first glance, that could seem really limiting. You know, like you don't have any say over your environment. You don't have any say over what you want to say. You don't have any say over your artists or who is saying it with you. But Jesse proposes that to be a creative means to have all these boundaries and create with them. And I think that's really important to understand, because if you're going to be in any industry, it goes back to that collaboration idea, right? You have to be able to work on a deliverable or understand what people expect from the work that you're doing. And that doesn't necessarily mean what you're making isn't art or isn't yours or isn't creative. It actually will give you a framework under which to express yourself and your ideas, if you're smart about it, which Jesse is. I have no idea how you will find Jesse Dryden online. He is not a millennial, so he doesn't have much of an online presence. You could Google him. He's on Facebook, Jesse Dryden, JESSEDRYDEN. He's probably also on circustalk.com, so you can go check him out there. As for me, I'm on Instagram at @the_artist_athlete. I'm on Facebook, The Artist Athlete. My website is theartistathlete.com. And if you love what you're listening to and want to support the arts and the entertainment and the beauty and the comedy and whatever else I have in store for you people, if you want to support it, patreon.com/theartistathlete. It would mean the world. Thank you for listening. I'll talk at you next week, friends, fans, and enemies. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hi everyone, this is Allie Cooper, owner and coach at the Radical Movement Factory in Santa Cruz, California. I love supporting the Artist Athlete podcast and the amazing community Shannon has created here. I teach rope and fabric and have a circus conditioning app available on iTunes called Cirque Plus. You can follow me on Instagram at AllieCooper_, and if you find yourself in California, come say hi.
Hi, I'm Leah. I hate conditioning, so I created the ABCs of Fitness, a fun, full program of active flexibility, body weight, and cardio with personal daily check-ins to motivate you wherever you are and whatever discipline you do. Join our next 19-day check-in challenge and slide into my DMs on Instagram at ABCs of Fitness.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell, and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast. Straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and swings and ropes by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we got a place for you.